Howdy folks, John here, and we are here for another John Talks. A few updates. I'm on 1962 of my Civil Rights Part 2 video. It's looking like it's going to be a longer video, perhaps around 20 minutes. It's heavy, but I'm very proud of it so far. Season 2 of Where Many Have Gone Before, my Star Trek podcast, has begun, and you can listen to that on Spotify, Apple Music, and all the usual podcast haunts. I talk about Kirk fighting Spock in this episode. Tons of Cable Guy vibes, you know. It's fun. You can support me and all my creative endeavours through Patreon at patreon.com/John D Ruddy. I'm not a million miles away from reaching my first major goal of 50 patrons. If I can reach that, I will begin producing audio commentaries for my Manny Man Does History videos, which will be exclusive for patrons. I'll be pausing the videos and pointing out loads of different tidbits about the history and the making of the videos, so hopefully you can help me get there. Now, this episode I'll be talking about tearing down statues. In the last week, Canada Day saw a very interesting backlash as more and more people are learning about the checkered past of Canada and its relationship to its Indigenous people. It's no secret that the Indigenous people of North America in general have suffered massively since the coming of European settlers 400 odd years ago. Through disease, forced migration, wars of conquest, genocide, and the insidious wedge of colonialism and imperialism has had a woeful effect on the remaining Indigenous people of North America. Many people may be a little more familiar with the USA's history with its natives, but Canada can often get overlooked, and where, yes, Canada's relationship with its Indigenous people is arguably better than the States, it's still not amazing, with problems about land ownership, oil pipelines, social problems, and indeed a deep, dark history. The residential schools in Canada were mandatory boarding schools for Indigenous children to be shipped away and taught how to be a Canadian. Classic colonialism. They were set up initially in the 1870s, and through this many languages and cultures were diluted or lost. There's a whole Manny Man Does History video to be made on this topic. There's a lot. In more recent times, it has come to light the massive abuse and neglect that went on in many of the Catholic-run residential schools, with mass graves being found at several sites across the country. With all of this, there has been a massive backlash against the Catholic Church and indeed the legacy of Canada. Thus, as Canada Day approached on July the 1st, many people planned to boycott Canada, wearing orange as a symbol of protest against the legacy of Canadian colonialism. On top of this, in the wake of these protests, a statue of Queen Victoria and Queen Elizabeth II were toppled in Winnipeg, and a statue of James Cook was toppled in British Columbia. So, toppling statues, yay or nay? It's complicated. I have many mixed feelings about a lot of this. So, statues are symbolic, and indeed the defacement or destruction of these statues can be equally symbolic, when done in the right way. Statues are symbols. Symbols mean things. History has seen many statues erected, and indeed many statues toppled, and there is no one answer to this question. I look at the history of the Indigenous people of Canada and see a lot of parallels with Irish history and our relationship with British colonialism. This is a topic I think I'll expand on more in another video, but suffice it to say, there have been many statues and symbols destroyed in Ireland along the way. Famously, one of the most well-known demolitions of a statue in Ireland was Nelson's Pillar in Dublin. So, Nelson's Pillar, for anyone who doesn't know, was built in the wake of the British victory at the Battle of Trafalgar during the Napoleonic Wars in 1805, and you can go and watch my video. about that. I've got a video about Napoleonic Wars. You've probably watched it. It's fine. And so the people of Dublin built a big pillar to celebrate this victory, because we all know how loyal a British city Dublin was once. Nelson's pillar actually predates the more famous Nelson's column in London. People were able to actually walk inside the pillar to the top and get a really cool view of Dublin. And at its top was indeed Lord Nelson, who died at the Battle of Trafalgar. It was super iconic, bearing witness to much of Dublin's history, including the 1913 lockout and indeed the Easter Rising. Ireland went on to get its independence from Britain, but this massive symbol of British victory remained, looking over Dublin. In 1966, the 50th anniversary of the rebellion, a bomb was planted at the top of the pillar by Irish Republicans, and boom, up went Nelson. Luckily, no one was injured in the blast, but the point was made and the pillar was greatly damaged and ultimately demolished. So, should this have happened? I mean, I'm the big history geek here, and I do have a fascination with buildings that no longer exist. And I see film footage from the early 1960s of the view from the top, and I wish it was still there. Obviously, I'm not looking at the symbolism, but there is a conversation to be had about whether or not another statue could have taken its place. Patrick Pearse, perhaps. The pillar, of course, overlooking the spot where Pearse read the Proclamation of Independence in front of the GPO in 1916. And this is indeed what happens when a conversation is not had and people take matters into their own hands. However, don't worry, there is a however. I can totally see the need to remove many statues. The Deep South in the United States, for example, is full of Confederate statues, most of which were erected long after the brief life of the failed state. Many in the late 19th and early 20th century erected officially to celebrate some of the people's heritage, but also to make a statement about who was in charge, the white supremacists. Statues devoted to people who fought to preserve slavery. And don't come at me with the states' rights stuff. Go watch my Civil Rights Part 1 video. Just don't. Some people think they're tearing down these statues will delete history, but unless you start burning books, that's not going to happen. Because we all know who likes burning books. Statues are symbols, and symbols mean things. Some suggest that Confederate statues be moved to a museum. They belong in a museum. Others say that that may just create a shrine to the Confederacy. Others again, such as Mr. Trumpy, made the suggestion that if they start toppling statues of Robert E. Lee, what's to stop them from toppling statues of George Washington or Thomas Jefferson, who owned enslaved people? And hey, Trump, I'll give you this. This is a very good question. It's very thought-provoking. As long as you're not going to go down the slippery slope narrative of, they're going to topple all of our statues. I mean, the Founding Fathers are not perfect, not by a long shot. And yes, they own, or many of them owned enslaved people. It's messed up. History is complex. Historical figures are complex. They were people. They were fallible. They weren't the cast in bronze perfect effigies you look up to. They were people. I, for one, would not be in favour of toppling a statue of Thomas Jefferson. I mean, he was a very interesting man, full of contradictions, and worth exploring these contradictions to better ourselves. And, I mean, the Declaration of Independence is a nicely worded document. These are wise words, enterprising men quote them. Don't act surprised, you guys, cause I wrote them. And before we continue, yes, he owned like 600 people. That's not right. I'm not defending him. Let us continue to learn from that. and how messed up it is. So contextualizing statues can sometimes be good. I was at the Jefferson Memorial in DC, and there is a ton of historical information there to read about it. Let's look at another country and how they dealt with powerful symbols. Germany! So, Nazi symbols are illegal in Germany. So much so that the band Kiss have a different logo in Germany because the SS in the logo looks too similar to the Nazi SS logo. They are a country who have, I think, quite healthfully dealt with their past. Yes, it's complex. Yes, there were some former Nazis involved in West Germany. But overall, the people of Germany know what happened and know how dangerous fascism is, and know how to be constantly vigilant against that sort of thing. And they remember all of this despite a complete lack of statues of Nazis in Germany. They were knocked down, they were destroyed mostly, or put in museums to give the correct context to the terrible nature of it all. The Topography of Terror is the museum in Berlin, built on the site of many of the Nazi headquarters. It is not a fancy building, it is stark, it is square, it is functional, it is there to tell the world, hey, come learn from our massive mistake. Hopping on to what I was talking about earlier in my last episode regarding a united Ireland, I'm not sure how I would feel if the statue of Queen Victoria in front of Belfast City Hall was destroyed or even just removed. It's a really cool, beautifully decorated statue, and it is indeed part of the history of Northern Ireland and part of the culture of many, many Unionists who live in Northern Ireland. But this is also part of what I refer to as the insidious wedge of colonialism. And Britain has had a particularly effective brand of colonialism in its symbolism. It's strong, it's iconic, it's contagious. Most of the former British Empire remained in the British Commonwealth. Get them speaking the language, get them playing the cricket, you'll have loyal subjects for life. Sort of. Another alternative to destroying statues? So, there was a statue of Queen Victoria in front of Leinster House, where the Irish Parliament sits in Dublin. See, I just did a colonialism. I said Irish Parliament and not Dáil Éireann. It's so insidious. It's our native language and I used the English word for it. And so the statue of Queen Victoria was removed from Leinster House in 1948 and put into storage, ultimately making its way to Sydney, Australia in 1987, where it was loaned to Australia until it's recalled. They figured, hey, you folks are still into the whole British colonial thing. Here you go. All this being said, I'm well aware that I'm a white guy in Ireland commentating about this. I don't try to be the last word in this discussion, and also this was a very Western-centric narrative of toppling statues. You know, we can talk about how pretty a statue is, or, you know, how lovely it is, but it is also what it symbolizes. And Queen Victoria, I mean, as relatively harmless as a woman as she was in herself, in her name, so much conquest was done. And there's the rain. You can probably hear the rain coming in here. Well, not coming in, thankfully. It's watertight, but it's tin roof. So, going back to Canada, I urge people to listen to the Indigenous people of what is now Canada. Listen to what they have to say. Listen to their very diverse opinions on this. It's positive to see Mary Simon becoming the first Inuk Indigenous person to become Governor General in Canada. One could be cynical and suggest it's a publicity stunt on behalf of Justin Trudeau to say, hey, look, we're listening. But it's better than nothing. And sometimes these stunts can result in positive change. Protest works. The message was heard and cannot be forgotten. We need to keep doing it until all of the change is made. I mean, you never stop changing. Oh well, that is the definition of a progressive, unless you're a conservative, in which you want to conserve, keep things the way they are. But statues are symbols, and symbols are powerful. Thanks for watching, folks. As always, this video was made possible by my supporters on Patreon. If you wish to join, you can do so at patreon.com/John D Ruddy. Visit johndruddy.com for updates, photos, and my online store. You can follow me at John D Ruddy on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Twitch, where I've been doing a lot of live streaming of my upcoming civil rights video. Check it out. Welcome to our new supporters: Brendan J. Cassidy, Brian Hembling, Frank Porter. Thanks to all my patrons: Alexander, Arthur Revan, Chair DJ, Colton Sayre, David Stranad, Emer Gibson, Senan age 10, Gretchen Sand, Helena RB, Jefferson Yates, Joshua Benjamin Heisler, Judy Friesen, Cafort, Catherine Gilks, Kythius, Lapre Shea Queen Vara, Marcus Booker, Mike Wise, Monday Rico, Mr. Magnificent, Mr. Research, Classy Black Men, Mr. Easy Play 2, Mycroft, Ollie Coors, Patrick McGrath, Rocket Wrench, Ryan Elano, Serena Kajani, SB, Suarez, Stephanie Lenz, Talitha Brower, Tanmay, Thomas Woods, Travis Dunn. Once again, thank you.